Hello my lovelies, so this is Lizzie from Love from Lizzie, and today I'm bringing you part 1 of the 10 card 1 kit video for the Vintage Escapes card kit. This is a super quick video. I'm going to rush through these cards and just show you all the important bits. So this is how I make my card bases. I split it lengthways, give it a score halfway down, and then use my bone folder at the top, and that is my top folding A2 size card base. Now this first card, I like to ease myself into a kit nice and gently. I've been a little bit out of practice with making, to be honest, and this is a really lovely simple layout. It's very easy to follow. I do everything by eye. I will measure obviously when it comes to card bases, but I just hold my piece of paper up on my card front and decide where I would like the lines to go for this particular piece. And then just use my T-square ruler to make sure I get super straight lines and snip it out. And then I hold up my second piece of patterned paper and just do the same again, just draw some lines in. I do erase them afterwards. Now here I'm using the distressing tool that came in the kit, just along 3 edges of those pieces I've cut. The 2 that butt next to one another I've left smooth so that they're going to tape down nicely. But I do that for both the top and the bottom. Then I flip them over, and the 2 soft sides, as it were, the ones I haven't distressed, I just tack together, just so that I know they're going to be nice and straight when I line them up on my card front. Pop some tape runner on the back, and then attach that down onto the card base. And then I'm taking one of the widths of lace and just measuring it out and snipping it. I did consider folding it around the back, but I didn't want it to be too bulky, as I wanted to lay the pattern papers directly onto the card base. So here I've chosen a piece of ephemera. You will get to see it shortly, and I popped some foam squares up, leaving a gap in the middle where the ribbon is so that it doesn't sit bulky. And whilst leaving the backers on, I've laid that on top just to see where it's going to go, so that I can position my stamps. So I've used the "wherever you are, I'm thinking about you." And I move them around, trying to choose where I think is the best spot with the ephemera piece. I make my choice, and I've picked out my walnut stain distress oxide because that colour sits really nicely on top of the pattern paper. I could have heat embossed this as well to make it a bit shiny, but I was trying to keep this quite calm and muted. And now I'm taking off the reverse of the foam squares, popping that onto the card front, and I do attach 3 little gems. This is quite a masculine card, but I really enjoy the colours of this. So that's card number 1. And now we're going to go into card number 2. And I'm just here to show you that I'm using the craft cardstock to make my card base. And then I usually do this by eye, but for the sake of showing if someone wants to give this a go, line it up on the craft mat, make sure your lines are nice and straight, and don't ever throw away any of the waste. And then line it up again, and I'm leaving what is about 1/4 of an inch in between each of the peel off strips there. You'll see in a later card why you mustn't throw away the waste bits, because they are all usable. But here, yes, so I'm lining it up and snipping away the top. I cut the top at exactly the right spot, and at the bottom I overhang it ever so slightly, just so that I can flip it over and give it a really nice trim. Now I've picked one of my pattern papers, and I've taken my stitched square cutting dies, and I do actually end up using the 3rd size that I go for, which is one of the larger ones. Run that through my die cut machine, and then we'll pop some of the photo corners around 2 of the corners. I quite like the look of not every one. And then once they're tucked on, I press it down. And that's the only adhesive that's on that piece of Paris paper. Then I've chosen a piece of ephemera and popped some foam squares behind, and then I use some glossy accents to attach down one of those little wooden pieces that comes in the kit, and it's just the frame. And then I very carefully go around and fill in all the way around the edges first, working towards the centre so that there's no air bubbles, so that's set to make it actually look like a picture frame. And then I've picked my little sentiment out. Now in hindsight, I should have stamped the sentiment before I attached the wooden piece. It was fine, it didn't cry too hard, but this is the problem with not planning your cards out before you make them. But I used the sentiment "You Are Missed," which is included in the stamp set, and that is my finished card. There are still shots at the end of all of these, so you can get a better look. So, card 3. I chose Frankfurt, the little ticket stub from the pattern paper. It has got this lovely spot gloss over the top. Gave that a little snip out. And then I picked one of the postage frames, which is the medium size frame, and I'm laying it down upside down over the top just to see how much I need to snip it by. And then I trim off the edges so that it will fit within that little black frame. I stick it down and I realised it was still a little bit too long, so I pulled it up and trimmed a little extra off so that it would sit nicely, and then I've popped it onto a piece of brown cardstock and trimmed that out. I'm using that same cardstock to make my card base, and then I've picked one of the pattern papers that has the aeroplanes on it, which I thought was quite fitting, being that it was a flight stub that was going to be the focal point. And as you can see here, I'm just using my pencil, my T-square ruler. When I'm measuring, I do often go over the end of the card base, as it were, because it's so much easier to stick it down and then trim off excess than trim it exactly perfect and then get it in exactly the right spot. So that's my little method there. And here, this is the tip for using the waste peel-offs. So I've run that peel-off up the side, and then I'm going to be putting my little topper piece somewhere in that region. So I lay down one of my waste pieces, and as long as you've got a really nice straight cut, you can butt them up and the naked eye would not see it. And then I snip that off, and then I lay the remaining piece down, because it doesn't matter that there's a gap in the middle, because that little Frankfurt ticket is going to sit over the top, as you're about to see. Popping some foam tape behind the topper, sticking that down, and then I've used the Brother die from the kit, and I've used some rose gold mirror, and I play around a little bit trying to decide where exactly it is I want it to sit. And then I also know that I want to add something extra, so I have a little rummage through the ephemera. There is lots of pieces that would have worked, and I really did like that aeroplane, particularly as one of my brothers flies an aeroplane, so this would have made a really good card for him. But I landed on one of the wooden arrows, and I decided to pull it in with that rose gold theme by heat embossing it. And my lead was at a really awkward position to be able to film this, so I've chopped out the majority of the heat embossing. I apologise for that. But I've covered the arrow in Versamark, tipped the embossing powder over one end, and then heat embossed that, and then did the other end. Trying to do the whole thing at once would just end up with burnt fingers. So I've just used a little precision glue pen to get the Brother directly onto the card front, and I've put some more glossy accents on the back there, and used a piece of wood, just a waste paper, sorry, just scrape it along the back of the wood so that it's a good solid fit. And now I'm going to add some gems just up along that one side of my topper. I'm sorry that the card's upside down, but I work better, I'm a lefty. And then I take one of the little airmail stickers from this sticker sheet that comes in the kit, and that is card number 3 finished. Now we're moving into card number 4, and I'm going to make a black card base. Now, I don't often like to use black on an actual card base because I can find that it's a bit much, but with this really nice sort of soft yellow that was in the kit, I thought, I will venture out of my comfort zone. So I've used the second from largest postage die, which is one of the add-ons that we released this month, and then I had to argue with the magnet and the die a little bit, as you can see, so that had to go. But I just sort of wanted a dry fit where I wanted everything to go, so that I knew that I had my stamp in the right spot, and then made sure that it was actually straight. And the lines on the MISTI are really good for that. And then I used my VersaFine Clair to keep the black in line, and I used the sentiment "I'm just a call away." And then I die cut the sun out of some black cardstock, popped some foam tape up behind the VW bug, and again wet glue straight onto the back of the sun, and then took the foam tape off, popped it on, and used a tape runner on the back and attached it onto my card base. So that's a really simple card, but I think it's quite effective, and that's because of the black. Okay, so card number 5. Now this is the one that's going to take some explaining. I made a card base out of craft cardstock, and I've used the suitcase stamp that came in the kit, and I've put it right in the middle of my big Misty. And if you can see at the bottom right hand corner, there's a little pencil mark. Now I use Versamark on the stamp and stamp it right into that top centre. And I do this a couple of times just to make sure that you get a really good juicy impression. And now I move my card base up 10 squares. I hope that makes sense. But I had a little count. I at this point was still working out how far up, but it worked out to be 10 squares up, and that left a really nice space for this particular stamp. So then I was just rinse and repeating. Then, obviously, to do the suitcase above the first one, I had to move it back down 20 squares. So I put it back to where it started from and then counted down, popped my magnets in place, and then stamped again. And then had to count how many squares across on either side. Now, from that original point, it needed to go across 9 squares. And because I didn't want them all to be in line, I moved it up 5 and across 9. I hope that makes sense. And then did the same repeating action of moving it up and down again so that you could get the whole lot in. I hope that makes sense. I will do another video sharing this process in more depth, but it is one of my favourite ways to use a really detailed stamp. And then I selected the sentiment, "You are loved," and just fit it in between those 2 suitcases, and decided to do that with the VersaFine Clair in black again, just to get that really lovely, deep, crisp impression, and make sure that it was in fact the focal point. And that is my 5th card. I will be making another 5. Jane has made hers, and Simone's made hers. Alina's are on their way. She's been studying super hard. But yes, they are my first 5. I will get another 5 out to you shortly. Here are some still shots. There is still quite literally a handful of these kits left in case you are interested. Thank you ever so much for sticking with me till the end. Until next time, make something beautiful.